Today with me is Branden Newman. Branden is member of the board of advisors at SecurityBridge and brings experience in InfoSec as a former lead of two DAX 30 companies. Thanks for taking the time, Branden, and good morning to Las Vegas.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Wow, looking back, time is flying. It has been 6 months since you have joined the board of advisors at SecurityBridge. Together, we had discussions on various security-related topics like security frameworks, compliance requirements that are essential for SAP, such as PCI. In your role as InfoSec expert, you have joined the board as the cybersecurity advisor. Is there anything in particular that has attracted you to this position?
Well, I didn't go out looking for it, but I initially started when I was leading information security across the government and various multinational companies. I continuously saw that SAP was kind of neglected in the security stack in general. There wasn't a lot of focus on SAP security. And when I looked through at every one of those companies, SAP was basically one of the top few critical applications of the company supporting very critical business processes. And I was wondering, why is that the case? Why are we neglecting something so important? So I went out myself looking for solutions to SAP security. I even tried to implement it myself in SIEM a time or two. But in the end, I landed on SecurityBridge, and it provided what I was looking for across the stack, from incident detection to patch management, code analysis, and things that I could use for compliance in the end.
So you just mentioned you failed integrating with the SIEM yourself. What was the challenge there?
Well, while it wasn't a complete failure, because we did get some small use cases accomplished by integrating with the SIEM, there's just so many log sources out of SAP that are not really formatted in a way that we're used to from cybersecurity, where you can take one or two log sources and compare them and come up with some answers. Plus, the security team, generally speaking, just doesn't know enough about SAP to know how to build out those use cases. So it turned out to be much more valuable for me to take expertise from a platform like SecurityBridge that's going to be kept up to date with all the latest and greatest, and perform things that I can't do in addition, like code analysis I'm never going to do internally myself. And it just turned out to be way better that way.
So it's not only a technical bridge that eliminates the technical gap of missing interfaces, for instance, for the established and industry-leading SIEM solution. It's also the know-how, this very specific know-how that is required, that needs context enrichment and normalization, obviously, right?
I actually, when I first started to implement on my own, I didn't even know what I needed to implement. I was going purely after threat detection, but after digging in more and getting more experience with SAP, I realized that there were many other areas I needed to address, and it was just a little bit more than the team themselves could keep up to date and implement on their own.
We speak to a lot of clients, and some of them have been successfully integrating the security audit log of SAP.
Sure, I would say security audit log gives you not near enough information to action on incidents. There's at least a dozen more logs in there that you would need to correlate and build enough use cases to actually have some detection coverage. I would say any security team that's tried to work with SAP teams about log management understands that it's a very high volume and high friction situation to store all logs, and only a small subset of that is relevant to security.
So would you say that actually poses a risk for the success of the project?
Yeah, sure. A big part of cyber defense is the so-called finding the needle in the haystack. And obviously, the bigger the haystack, the harder it is to find the needle. So it's any time we have a technology that's able to really zero us in, at least in the focus area we need to be on to investigate an incident, the better.
Great. So now, again, recapping on the 6 months that you have spent with our team, with the SAP experts, what did you learn in particularly from them, from the time working with the team?
I learned a lot. So I came into this not knowing a lot about SAP. So I obviously knew it was an application that's very critical, but I came to it purely as a cybersecurity expert. And I initially tried to just apply my knowledge across the rest of the technology stack directly to SAP, but it doesn't really work that way. I think the log example we just gave is a great example of a complexity that's just I had no idea about before I started down this journey. And then on top of this, there's complexities throughout the entire application stack of SAP, which are really unique to SAP and don't apply to a lot of other application stacks. So it's been a very steep learning curve for me to figure out how to speak the SAP language enough to interact with those teams and understand how to kind of put that security overlay on top of it in a way that it can be mapped back to the overall security program.
And as a matter of fact, a lot of InfoSec experts that I speak to, that are not into SAP, they assume SAP is just one application, it's one box, right? But there is a complex architecture of staging systems behind. So you need a development, a test system, a production system. Then you have the concept of clients to separate the individual stacks amongst each other. And there is interfacing all over the place. And obviously, it's a very different language that the SAP security or the SAP team speaks. So I assume that you also ran into that problem when you first approached the SAP team at your company and try to introduce a security initiative or program on application level.
Yeah, sure. That's a very good point. I think I was probably one of those people that thinks we have a few boxes somewhere running SAP when I first started down this journey. But as you know, at least one of the companies that I implemented at had hundreds of SAP instances. And from the security team's point of view, when I arrived, that was just one application over there that was fairly important. And it's not only how it works with production dev and the other environments across such a complex landscape. It's also the way that the network flows work, how network flows come into the environment and interact with SAP, how the SAP systems interact with each other is much different than we're used to across the rest of technology stacks. And there's just numerous examples of how until you dig in or have a way to look at it in your own terms, a way you understand, then that you just don't come across because it's such a unique landscape.
Now that we know SAP is reinventing themselves to become a cloud company, we see more and more companies moving into external hosting, private cloud or infrastructure as a cloud service providers. What does this tell us in terms of security?
Well, I think that application security has almost always been around in some form or another, but it hasn't been focused on by security teams for various reasons due to complexity or due to other priorities when we still based our security around perimeters and things like this. But with the push to the cloud, as you mentioned, and also the push for zero trust due to the move to the cloud, security teams have basically reprioritized based on that new risk posture in a way that lets them focus on application security more. And when they start focusing on application security, the obvious way to do that is with a risk-based approach, focusing on the most critical applications first. And that's why SAP almost always comes to the top of the list.
Interesting. So let me come back to that zero trust initiative. So that means, in other words, companies are tending to give their data and the critical systems away into the hands of a cloud provider, but they don't trust them.
I would say we trust in general they know how to run a data center, but it behooves us to build a security stack that you can trust but verify in the end.
That's very insightful. Thank you. To wrap this up, at which degree of the security posture of your SAP system are you satisfied as a CISO? Or let me rephrase this. So how do you measure success in this area?
Sure. Well, I would say it's a success from the first time you get buy-in from leadership and or that operational team to even move down the journey of security, because it's very important to not run security in a silo and make sure that you're moving it toward the objectives of the business overall, and you're actually supporting business objectives. But once you get to that point, the real goal, in my opinion, is to apply the security controls that we already know and we have in our overall security program, to apply those to these critical applications such as SAP. So as soon as you have the ability to say, yes, I know that I am controlling patches correctly, I know that I'm monitoring the environment well, I know that I'm scanning code for vulnerabilities, I know that I'm mapping to the compliance frameworks that I'm required to based on my industry. When you're able to get that kind of insight and map it back to your security program in a way that you can prioritize your efforts and brief risks up to top leadership, then I think you've basically made a success. Regardless of how the security posture itself is, you obviously want to improve that over time. But the first big win is just understanding it. I think if you asked many security teams what the security posture of their SAP landscape is, they wouldn't be able to answer it in a way that's satisfactory.
And I can only imagine the starting phase is the hard phase, right? Once it is rolling, it is getting better and better. It's like a skill in the company that you implement that's called security. We recently heard about the vulnerability in Microsoft's Exchange. We just spoke about a terrible incident, burned down data center of a hosting provider. Why would you say there is not more news about SAP breaches all over the place? Because they are the systems are so critical, and SAP themselves say 77% of the world's transactional revenue is touched by an SAP system.
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to say. It's probably a combination of the criticality of the system. Many of these systems in the US, for example, are covered by SOX compliance. Across the world, they're running everything from HR processes to the most critical finances processes of the entire company. So I think some of it has to do with criticality. The other thing that may have to do with it is a lot of SAP compromises come from internals. It may not be internals to the company itself, but some consultants or something that the company has hired and brought in themselves. So that's something that's a lot easier to keep in-house and kind of hush-hush as you're responding to the incident than a full-on external breach. But I did speak at a SAP security conference not too long ago, and there were people in the audience that definitely alluded to the fact that they've had SAP security incidents, but they were not willing to speak about them even in closed forums. So it's definitely obvious that there's still kind of a stigma. There's a stigma around reporting of incidents across the board in general. I think that's slowly starting to resolve itself, but the stigma around SAP incidents is even larger, in my opinion.
Yeah, and at that moment in time, kudos to one of our customers, Hydro Aluminium. I recently ran a German-speaking webinar with them. They were totally transparent. They had been victim of a ransomware attack, and they used our SecurityBridge to prove that the SAP system hasn't been compromised, and they were really open on what has happened there. If there is a credit card data leak on a broader scale from a big enterprise, that this could come from an SAP system. It's just the detail level is not exposed, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would say that a huge portion of the company's critical data, not to mention just supporting of business processes operationally, are housed inside of the ERP systems. Mm-hmm. And this that may be the source of data, but downstream it gets compromised, or in the source itself, but it's not always required to report specifically where the compromise happened. This is one of the reasons we need to address application security much better than we have in the past is because it doesn't matter if it was an external Microsoft vulnerability. Once the attackers are in your environment, they want to pivot to your crown jewels and get the data that they want or make the impact that they want. So we can no longer make the assumption that these systems sitting inside of our perimeter are secure. We need to have application level visibility on all the various controls that need to be applied based on the criticality of said application.
And just to add on this, I mean, in a hybrid cloud environment, what is internal, what is external? There's a complex network, and there's definitely also a trend in the SAP industry that more and more services from SAP are exposed to the outside world. Good, Branden, thanks again. It was again a pleasure to speak to you. Together, we are there to make SecurityBridge a holistic security platform for SAP that covers all the aspects and also helps the customers from day one on to understand their security posture concerning the critical enterprise applications in the various areas that are important. Thanks again, Branden.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I look forward to continuing to mature the product over time. Have a good one.